My world was crumbling, staring down the barrel of my family's laughter after I'd been left just a single dollar. I didn't know it was my grandfather's final, brilliant act of love. The polished mahogany conference table stretched between us like an emotional no-man's land. On one side, my mother, Elaine, and my father, David, radiated a smug satisfaction that churned my stomach. Next to them, my sister, Sophia, practically vibrated with excitement, already mentally spending her newfound fortune. I sat alone at the opposite end, the only comfort Mr. Davis, the estate attorney who'd served my grandfather, Arthur, for 3 decades. Rain hammered against the windows of Davis and Company, each drop a drumbeat matching my frantic pulse. Arthur's funeral had been 3 days ago, and the grief still pressed heavy in my chest, making every breath an effort. "Let's begin," Mr. Davis said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He opened a leather portfolio embossed with my grandfather's initials, ADH Arthur Thomas Hamilton, the man who'd taught me chess, taken me fishing, and truly believed I could be anything. My father cleared his throat, a sound thick with anticipation. He wore his charcoal suit, reserved for big business deals and family events where appearances mattered. My mother sat stiffly beside him, her pearl necklace catching the fluorescent light. To my daughter, Elaine, and her husband, David, Mr. Davis read, "I leave my vintage car collection, valued at approximately $400,000. My mother's mouth curved into a pleased smile. She'd never cared about those cars, but the dollar amount satisfied her. To my granddaughter, Sophia Adams, I leave the sum of $6.9 million, along with the contents of my safety deposit box at Capital One Bank." The room erupted. Sophia actually squealed, bouncing in her leather chair like she was 12 instead of 32. My father clapped once, a sharp sound of approval. My mother turned to me with that familiar expression I'd seen countless times, pity mixed with condescension. And to my granddaughter, Chloe Adams, Mr. Davis continued, his voice steady, "I leave $1. Silence crashed over the room. Then my father started to laugh, a deep belly rumble that shook his shoulders. My mother joined in, her laughter high and cutting. $1, my father managed between chuckles. "That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Some kids just don't measure up," my mother said, examining her manicured nails, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I suppose your grandfather finally saw what we've been telling you for years." Sophia had the decency to look uncomfortable, but she didn't defend me. She never did. Her eyes darted between our parents and me, landing somewhere in the middle distance. The single-dollar bill lay on the table in front of Mr. Davis, crisp inside a small envelope with my name in Arthur's distinctive handwriting. The sight of it made my throat tighten. "Go earn your own," my father added, wiping his eyes. "Maybe this will finally motivate you to stop being so mediocre." 28 years of being second best crashed over me. Every time Sophia won an award and I got a participation ribbon. Every time my parents attended her school plays but missed my debate tournaments. Every graduation where they beamed wider for her achievements and offered half-hearted congratulations for mine. I reached for the envelope, my hand surprisingly steady. The true hurt would come later. Right now, I felt strangely numb. "There is, however," Mr. Davis said, his voice taking on a different quality, "an additional document." My mother's laughter cut off mid-trill. "What additional document?" "Mr. Hamilton left specific instructions that this letter be read only after the initial distribution." Mr. Davis withdrew a sealed envelope from the portfolio. The wax seal bore my grandfather's signet ring impression. "This letter is addressed to the entire family." Something in his tone made everyone straighten. The jovial atmosphere evaporated like morning fog under harsh sunlight. Mr. Davis broke the seal with practiced precision. He unfolded 2 pages of heavy, cream stationery. My grandfather's handwriting covered both sides in his characteristic strong strokes. "My dearest family," Mr. Davis began reading. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone, and you've just witnessed the reading of what you believe to be my final wishes. Elaine, David, Sophia, you're probably celebrating. Chloe is probably wondering what she did wrong. Let me illuminate a few things. My mother's face had gone white. My father leaned forward, his previous amusement replaced by something approaching concern. Sophia received $6.9 million and the contents of my safety deposit box. What I didn't mention is that the safety deposit box contains documentation of every penny her parents have stolen from her over the years. Bank statements showing withdrawals from her childhood trust fund. Signatures forged on loan documents. Tax returns listing her as a dependent while spending her inheritance money on European vacations. Sophia's gasp echoed through the office. She turned to her parents with an expression of dawning horror. That's approximately $2.3 million stolen from your own daughter, Mr. Davis continued reading. All documented, all illegal. The box also contains evidence that you, David, embezzled funds from your own company and used Sophia's social security number to hide the money trail. My father shot to his feet. This is outrageous. He can't. Sit down, Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Davis said coldly. I'm not finished. Elaine, the letter continued, you spent 28 years comparing your daughters, favoring one over the other. You told yourself it was because Sophia was special, talented, worthy. The truth is simpler and uglier. Sophia looked like you. Chloe looked like her grandmother, my late wife Eleanor, the woman you resented because I loved her more than I'll ever love you, or the son you trapped me into accepting when you married him. My mother made a strangled sound. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. The vintage car collection I left you is worthless. I sold the valuable vehicles 2 years ago and replaced them with replicas and restored junkers. Total value about $40,000, not the $400,000 the fake appraisal suggests. Good luck explaining that to the IRS when you try to claim it as inheritance. My father sank back into his chair, his face purple with rage, or embarrassment, or both. Now, regarding Chloe, Mr. Davis read, and his voice softened. My brilliant, underestimated granddaughter received $1 in the initial reading. That was for effect, and to watch your reactions, Chloe. In the portfolio Mr. Davis is currently holding, there are additional documents for you. Mr. Davis sat down the letter and withdrew a thick folder. He slid it across the table to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. The $1 was symbolic, Mr. Davis explained, his professional demeanor cracking slightly to show genuine warmth. What you actually inherit is the following: the Hamilton family estate in Vermont, valued at $8.5 million. Your grandfather's investment portfolio, currently worth $12.2 million. His stake in Hamilton Industries, approximately $18 million. The lake house in New Hampshire. The apartment building in Philadelphia, generating $400,000 annually in rental income. And his personal library, which he knew you'd value more than any sum of money. The documents swam before my eyes. Property deeds, stock certificates, bank statements showing figures with so many zeros they seemed abstract. Your total inheritance is approximately $43 million, Mr. Davis said. Your grandfather set up this elaborate reveal because he wanted your parents to show their true nature one final time. He wanted Sophia to see what they've done, and he wanted you to understand that he always saw your worth, even when others didn't. My mother started screaming. The sound was primal, animalistic. She lunged across the table, her manicured nails aimed at my face. My father grabbed her, pulling her back as she shrieked about betrayal and ungrateful children. How could your grandfather do this to his own daughter? You manipulative little witch, she spat at me. You poisoned him against us. You spent all that time with him, whispering lies. I never said a word against you, I replied quietly. My voice didn't shake. I didn't have to. He saw everything himself. Sophia sat frozen, the documents about her stolen money clutched in her shaking hands. She looked between our parents and me, her perfect world crumbling around her designer shoes. The letter continues, Mr. Davis said, raising his voice above my mother's histrionics. Sophia, you have a choice. You can keep the $6.9 million and use the evidence against your parents, or you can throw your lot in with them and spend the next decade in legal battles as Chloe's attorneys pursue fraud charges. Choose wisely. There's more, he added, looking at my parents. Mr. Hamilton has arranged for copies of all evidence to be delivered to the IRS, the State Attorney General, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division unless certain conditions are met. My father found his voice. What conditions? Complete restitution to Sophia. Public acknowledgement of the embezzlement and fraud. Resignation from the Hamilton Industries Board. Yes, David, Arthur knew you'd been positioning yourself for a hostile takeover. And zero contact with Chloe unless she initiates it. We'll fight this, my mother hissed. Her mascara had run in black streaks down her cheeks. We'll contest the will. We'll prove he was incompetent. Good luck, Mr. Davis said dryly. Mr. Hamilton had himself evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists in the month before his death. All confirmed his complete mental competence. He also video recorded himself explaining his decisions, which will be made available to any court that requests it. He was quite thorough. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows like applause. I looked at the documents in front of me. Proof that someone had valued me, believed in me, loved me enough to protect me even from beyond the grave. I need to leave, I said, standing on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Mr. Davis, can we schedule another meeting to discuss the details? Of course. I'll have my secretary call you. He handed me a business card. Your grandfather chose his timing perfectly. Everything is in order. You just need to sign some papers. I walked toward the door, my family's voices rising behind me in a cacophony of accusations, denials, and desperate justifications. Sophia called my name once, but I didn't turn around. She'd made her choice years ago when silence was easier than defending me. The elevator ride down felt surreal. The lobby was pristine, all marble floors and understated elegance. People hurried past with briefcases and umbrellas, living their normal lives, while mine had just transformed completely. Outside, the rain soaked through my blazer within seconds. I didn't care. I tilted my face up and let the water wash over me, mixing with tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Davis. Your grandfather left one more thing. A letter for you alone. Come by tomorrow when you're ready. I stood on the sidewalk outside Davis and Company and let myself feel everything. The grief for my grandfather, sharp and fresh. The betrayal from my parents, old but somehow still capable of cutting deep. The vindication, bittersweet and strange. A taxi splashed past, and I flagged down the next one. As I climbed into the backseat and gave my address, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked different. Older. Stronger, definitely. The rest of that day passed in a blur. I went back to my apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades, and sat on my second-hand couch staring at nothing. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Sophia ranged from, "We need to talk," to, "I didn't know about any of this, I swear." I ignored them all. Around midnight, someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole and saw my Aunt Sarah, my mother's younger sister. She was the only family member who'd ever shown me genuine affection, though even she'd kept her distance to avoid my mother's wrath. I heard what happened, she said when I opened the door. She held a bottle of wine and a bag from the Chinese restaurant 3 blocks over. Your grandfather called me 2 weeks before he died. Told me everything he was planning. Asked me to check on you after. We sat at my small kitchen table, eating lo mein straight from the containers. Sarah had my grandfather's eyes, clear hazel that seemed to see through pretense. Your mother called me 17 times today, Sarah said, refilling our wine glasses. She's threatening to sue everyone involved. Your father's lawyer shopping. Sophia's in shock. Apparently, the whole family's imploding. Good, I said, surprising myself with the vehemence. They deserve to implode. Sarah studied me over the rim of her glass. Your grandfather spent his last year putting this together. He interviewed lawyers, accountants, forensic specialists, had private investigators documenting everything. He was methodical about it. Why didn't he tell me? He wanted your reactions to be genuine. If you'd known, you might have acted differently at the reading. He needed your parents to reveal themselves completely, without any doubt. She paused. He also didn't want to burden you with the knowledge. Let you grieve him purely, without this hanging over you. I thought about the funeral, how I'd cried without restraint while my parents had maintained perfect composure. How Sophia had delivered a polished eulogy about his business acumen, while I'd been too overwhelmed to speak. He'd given me the gift of genuine mourning. There's something else you should know, Sarah continued. Your grandfather left instructions for me, too. I'm to help you transition into everything, the properties, the investments, the business dealings. He knew you'd need someone you could trust, someone who isn't after your money. Are you sure you want to get involved? Elaine will never forgive you. Sarah laughed, a sharp sound. Your mother stopped speaking to me 5 years ago because I refused to loan her $50,000 to remodel her kitchen. I've been persona non grata for a while now. Might as well embrace it fully. Over the next several hours, she walked me through what the coming weeks would look like. Property transfers, tax implications, media management strategies. My grandfather had hired a public relations firm to handle inquiries. He'd anticipated everything, including the fact that this would become news. The Hamilton family is prominent in business circles, Sarah explained. When this breaks, and it will break, you'll be under scrutiny. Arthur prepared detailed statements for you to release if you want to use them, or you can craft your own, but he wanted you to have options. By 3 a.m, we'd covered the basics. Sarah hugged me at the door, holding on longer than necessary. You're going to be fine, she said. Better than fine. Your grandfather saw in you what I've always seen. Strength that doesn't need to announce itself. Intelligence that doesn't require validation. Worth that exists independent of anyone else's opinion. After she left, I opened my laptop and started researching foundation structures, charitable giving strategies, investment management firms that specialized in ethical portfolios. If I was going to inherit this much, I needed to understand how to steward it properly. The next morning, I returned to Mr. Davis's office. He handed me an envelope thick with pages written in my grandfather's handwriting. I read it in his waiting room, curled up in a leather chair that smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco. My dearest Chloe, it began. If you're reading this, you've survived what I imagine was a spectacularly ugly scene. I apologize for putting you through that, but some lessons can only be learned through fire. His words painted a picture of a man who'd watched his daughter become someone he didn't recognize, who'd seen his son-in-law's greed and his favorite granddaughter's willful blindness. Who'd noticed the quiet strength in the granddaughter everyone overlooked. You reminded me of Eleanor, he wrote. Not just in looks, though you have her eyes and her smile. You had her spirit. Curious, independent, kind without being weak. Your mother resented Eleanor for being everything she wasn't. She's resented you for the same reason. The letter detailed years of observations. How I'd helped elderly neighbors with groceries without being asked. How I tutored kids at the community center every Saturday. How I'd earned my master's degree while working full-time because I refused to take handouts that came with conditions. You built a life based on your own merit, he wrote. That's why I'm trusting you with this inheritance. Not because you're my granddaughter, but because I know you'll do something meaningful with it. You won't waste it on status symbols or empty pleasures. You'll use it to build, to help, to create something lasting. The final paragraph made my tears fall fresh. I'm proud of you, Chloe. I'm sorry I couldn't say it more often while I was alive. Your parents' disapproval was so loud, and I was too much of a coward to contradict them as firmly as I should have. This is my apology, and my faith in you rolled into one. Make something beautiful with this gift. And remember that you are always enough, always worthy, always loved. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Mr. Davis appeared in the doorway of his office, giving me space to compose myself. Ready to discuss next steps? He asked gently. His office was exactly what you'd expect from a senior attorney, law books lining the walls, diplomas from Stanford and Columbia, photographs of his grandchildren on the credenza. He poured coffee from a silver carafe and settled behind his desk. Your grandfather structured everything to minimize tax burden and maximize flexibility, he began, sliding a folder across the desk. The Hamilton Industries shares transfer immediately. The real estate enters a trust with you as the sole beneficiary and trustee. The investment portfolio transitions through a series of graduated transfers over the next 6 months to avoid market disruptions. We spent 3 hours going through documents. I signed papers until my hand cramped, initialing margins and dating forms. Each signature felt like stepping into a different life, one I'd never imagined for myself. What happens with my parents? I asked during a brief break. Mr. Davis's expression hardened. That depends on several factors. The evidence your grandfather compiled is damning, but criminal prosecution requires the district attorney to press charges. Sophia would need to file a formal complaint regarding the stolen funds. The embezzlement from Hamilton Industries requires the board to take action. And if they do nothing, then your grandfather's nuclear option activates. All evidence goes public. Media outlets, regulatory agencies, professional organizations. He was prepared to destroy their reputations, even if the legal system moved slowly. I thought about my mother's face as she'd lunged across the conference table, my father's purple rage, the way they'd laughed at my $1. Part of me wanted to watch them burn. A larger part just wanted to never think about them again. I want to be fair, I said slowly. I want them to face consequences for what they did. But I don't want revenge to consume me. Is there a middle path? Mr. Davis nodded approvingly. Your grandfather anticipated you to ask that. He left you with options rather than mandates. You can pursue full prosecution, negotiate a settlement that includes restitution and admission of guilt, or let the civil suits handle it while you move forward. The choice is yours. Over the next 2 weeks, I met with financial advisors, property managers, and tax specialists. Each meeting revealed new complexities. The Vermont estate needed a full-time groundskeeper and housekeeper. The Philadelphia apartment building required renovations to bring it up to code. The investment portfolio contained holdings in 37 different companies across 6 countries. I also met with Dr. Evelyn Reed, a therapist who specialized in sudden wealth syndrome. My grandfather had prepaid 20 sessions, apparently aware that inheriting millions overnight came with psychological challenges. Many people who receive sudden wealth struggle with guilt, fear, and relationship changes, Dr. Reed explained during our first session. You're also dealing with family trauma, grief, and a very public revelation. That's a lot to process. She was right. I'd wake at 3 a.m. convinced this was all a dream, or worse, some elaborate prank. I'd check my bank balance compulsively, watching the numbers that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. I stopped going to my favorite coffee shop because the barista asked if I was that Hamilton girl from the news. The media had indeed gotten hold of the story. Local news ran segments about estate planning gone wrong and family inheritance battles. Business publications covered the embezzlement angle and the Hamilton Industries fallout. A few tabloids tried to paint me as a scheming granddaughter who'd manipulated an old man until the video my grandfather recorded was leaked. Watching him on screen, still vital and sharp just weeks before his death, explaining his decisions in calm, measured tones, it broke something open in me. He spoke directly to the camera about watching his daughter prioritize appearances over integrity, about seeing his son-in-law's greed corrupt family relationships, about the granddaughter who reminded him why family should matter. "Chloe never asked me for anything," he said in the video. "She visited because she enjoyed my company. She listened to my stories even when she'd heard them before. She fixed my computer, helped in the garden, and debated philosophy with me over chess games that lasted hours. She valued me as a person, not as a bank account. That's rare. That's precious. And that's why I'm trusting her with everything I've built." The video went viral. Suddenly, public opinion shifted entirely in my favor. People shared their own stories of being overlooked by family, of golden children who could do no wrong while they were perpetually disappointing. Strangers sent letters of support to Mr. Davis's office by the hundreds. One letter stood out. A woman named Hannah Jenkins wrote about losing her inheritance to a sibling who charmed their elderly father while she'd worked 2 jobs to stay afloat. "Your grandfather gave you more than money," she wrote. "He gave you validation that you deserved better. That's the real gift." She was right. The money was transformative, yes, but the knowledge that someone had truly seen me, truly valued me, that changed everything. 3 months later, I sat in the study of the Vermont estate, my estate now. The room smelled of lemon polish and old books, exactly as it had when my grandfather sat in the same chair. The transition to the estate had been more complicated than I'd anticipated. The staff, Alice, the housekeeper who'd worked for my grandfather for 20 years, and Michael, the groundskeeper who maintained the gardens, had initially treated me with cautious formality. They'd watched my mother boss them around during holiday visits, seeing how my father had treated them like servants rather than employees. "Miss Chloe," Alice had said during my first week, standing stiffly in the kitchen doorway. "Will you be requiring the same schedule Mrs. Elaine preferred?" I'd looked up from the coffee I was making myself. "What schedule was that?" "Breakfast at 8 precisely. Lunch at noon. Dinner at 7. No staff in the main house between 2 and 4. No speaking unless spoken to." Her voice was neutral, but I caught the tension underneath. "Alice, how long have you worked here?" 23 years, miss." "And in all that time, did my grandfather follow that schedule?" A small smile cracked her professional demeanor. "Mr. Hamilton ate whenever he felt like it, usually in the kitchen while asking about my grandchildren. He insisted I call him Arthur, though I never could bring myself to do it." "Then let's do what feels natural," I'd said. "I'm not my mother. I'm barely figuring out how to live in a house with more than 2 rooms. I'd appreciate your guidance more than your formality." The relief on her face had been palpable. Over the following weeks, Alice taught me the house's rhythms, which floorboards creaked, how to manage the temperamental heating system, where my grandfather had hidden his favorite chocolates from my grandmother's health-conscious meal plans. Michael showed me the gardens, explaining which roses my grandmother had planted, and which my grandfather had added after her death, each one marking an anniversary they'd never spend together. "He talked about you often," Michael told me one afternoon as we pruned the rose bushes. "Said you had your grandmother's way of seeing beauty in ordinary things. He'd show me pictures of sketches you'd done as a child, flowers, buildings, people at the park. Said you noticed what others overlooked." I'd never known my grandfather kept those childhood drawings. The discovery sat warm in my chest. Another piece of evidence that I'd mattered to someone when I'd felt invisible to everyone else. My phone rang. Sophia's name appeared on the screen. I'd blocked my parents' numbers, but I'd left hers open. She'd called 17 times since the will reading. I'd answered exactly none. This time, I picked up. "Chloe," she said, her voice small. "Please don't hang up. I'm listening. I filed fraud charges against Mom and Dad. Used all the evidence Grandpa left. They're facing criminal prosecution and civil suits from the company. Dad's been removed from the board. Mom's having some kind of breakdown." I waited. Silence stretched between us like a chasm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. For not defending you. For letting them treat you like you didn't matter. For being too scared or selfish or blind to see what was happening. Are you sorry because it's right, or because you need something from me?" "Both," she admitted. "I know that's horrible, but I'm trying to be honest. I'm in therapy, working through a lot of things. And yes, I could use help navigating the legal stuff, but mostly I miss my sister. I miss who we could have been if I hadn't been so weak." I looked out the window at the gardens my grandfather had maintained for 50 years. The roses were blooming despite the approaching autumn, defiant splashes of color against the darkening season. "I can't promise anything," I said finally. "But I'm willing to have coffee once. See where it goes from there." "Really?" Hope lifted her voice. When I'm ready. Could be next week. Could be next year. I'll let you know." After we hung up, I returned to the correspondence scattered across the desk. Letters from charitable organizations, investment advisors, architects. I decided to convert the Philadelphia apartment building into affordable housing for artists and entrepreneurs. The lake house in New Hampshire would become a retreat for teachers and social workers who needed respite. The Philadelphia project had become my immediate focus. The building sat in a neighborhood undergoing rapid gentrification, and the current tenants, mostly long-time residents paying below-market rent, faced displacement. My property manager, a woman named Maria Santos, who'd worked in affordable housing for 15 years, had laid out the situation bluntly. "You could triple the rent tomorrow and have a waiting list of tech workers," she'd said during our first meeting at the property. "Or you could preserve something valuable that's disappearing from this city." We'd walked through all 6 floors, Maria introducing me to tenants. Mrs. Miller, a retired teacher on the 3rd floor who'd lived there for 38 years. The Rodriguez family on the 5th floor, parents who both worked 2 jobs to support 3 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. Daniel, a musician on the 2nd floor who taught guitar to neighborhood kids between gigs that barely covered rent. "Your grandfather never raised rent more than 2% annually," Mrs. Miller told me, serving tea in her immaculate apartment filled with pictures of former students. "He said housing should be a right, not a luxury. When my husband died and I thought I'd lose this place, Mr. Hamilton told me I had a home as long as I wanted one. The decision had been easy. I'd hired architects to renovate the building, updating electrical systems, improving insulation, modernizing kitchens and bathrooms while keeping every current tenant at their existing rent. The project would cost nearly $2 million and generate minimal return on investment. My financial advisor had nearly choked on his coffee when I explained the plan. "This is not a sound financial strategy," he'd said carefully. "Good thing I have $41 million other dollars to invest soundly," I'd replied. "This building is about something else." Ruth had hugged me after that meeting, tears in her eyes. "Your grandfather would be proud," she'd said. "You're carrying forward his values, not just his wealth." The phone rang again. This time, Mr. Davis. "The video your grandfather recorded has been released per his instructions. He said it's gone viral." He named names, showed documents, explained everything. "The press is calling it the Hamilton inheritance scandal. Your parents are being investigated by multiple agencies." "How did it get out?" "Your grandfather arranged for it to be released to media outlets exactly 90 days after the will reading. He wanted to give everyone time to make their choices first. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. Vindication was supposed to feel triumphant, but mostly it felt hollow. My grandfather was still gone. My childhood couldn't be rewritten. The hurt didn't disappear just because everyone now knew the truth. "There's something else," Mr. Davis continued. "Your grandfather established a foundation in your name. He seeded it with $5 million and appointed you as director. He left instructions that it should support women who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or told they weren't good enough. He said you'd know exactly what that meant. After the call ended, I sat in my grandfather's chair and cried. Not from sadness or anger, but from the overwhelming weight of being truly seen, of being valued, not for what I could provide or how I made someone else look, but simply for existing as myself. The sun was setting when I finally stood up. I walked through the house, running my hands along furniture polished by decades of care. In the library, thousands of books stood like soldiers awaiting orders. My grandfather had marked certain ones with slips of paper, annotations in the margins meant for me. I pulled out a worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. His note read, "Remember, the best revenge is living well and with purpose. Make them irrelevant by making yourself exceptional." 6 months after the will reading, I launched the Hamilton Foundation for Underestimated Women. The first grant went to a single mother trying to finish her engineering degree. The 10th went to a former foster kid starting a non-profit for homeless youth. By the end of the first year, we distributed over $3 million. Sophia came to the launch event. We had our coffee, then lunch, then several long conversations where she confronted truths about our family that she'd spent 32 years avoiding. She donated $1 million to the foundation, her way of trying to balance scales that could never truly be even. "I envy you," she told me that night, watching guests mingle in the ballroom my grandfather had built for my grandmother. "You knew who you were without their approval. I'm still figuring out who I am when they're not telling me." "You have time," I said. "We both do." My parents tried to contact me through lawyers, then through distant relatives, then through increasingly desperate messages left at various businesses I dealt with. I ignored all of it. Mr. Davis handled any necessary legal communications. My grandfather had been right. The best revenge wasn't confrontation or cruelty. It was building something meaningful and refusing to let their toxicity touch it. I dated a professor I met at a charity auction. He knew nothing about my family drama and cared more about my opinions on social entrepreneurship than my bank balance. We spent weekends hiking and debating philosophy and cooking elaborate meals that didn't always turn out well. It was ordinary in the best possible way. On the anniversary of my grandfather's death, I visited his grave with an armful of roses from his garden. The headstone was simple granite, just his name and dates in a line from his favorite poem, "The great thing in this world is not so much where we stand, as in what direction we are moving." "I'm moving forward, Grandpa," I said, arranging the roses. "Like you knew I would." The wind picked up, rustling through the cemetery trees. I like to imagine it was his way of saying he'd always known I'd be fine. Better than fine. That the girl everyone overlooked would become the woman no one could ignore, not through wealth or revenge, but through the steady accumulation of meaningful work and genuine relationships. 2 years later, I testified before Congress about inheritance fraud and financial mistreatment of the elderly. My parents' case had become a landmark prosecution, leading to policy changes and increased protections. I spoke about my grandfather's strategic planning, how he protected not just his assets but his legacy. The committee chair thanked me for my courage. I smiled, thinking my grandfather would have appreciated the irony. It hadn't taken courage to tell the truth. It had simply taken the security of knowing someone believed in me enough to give me a foundation to stand on. The Hamilton Foundation grew. We funded scholarships, business grants, emergency assistance for women fleeing mistreatment. Every check signed, every life changed, was a testament to my grandfather's faith and my refusal to be defined by anyone else's limited vision. Sophia and I rebuilt something. Not the relationship we should have had as children, but an honest one based on who we actually were as adults. She volunteered at the foundation, using her business degree to help grant recipients develop sustainable plans. She'd lost most of her inheritance to legal fees and claims from victims of our father's embezzlement schemes, people who sued the family for restitution traced funds back to her accounts. She'd gained something more valuable, though, self-respect earned through confronting hard truths. My mother sent a letter on my 30th birthday. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside, 3 pages of self-justification mixed with half-hearted apologies. She had lost everything: her marriage, my father left when the money ran out, her social standing, her self-image as a good mother. She blamed my grandfather, the lawyers, the system. She blamed everyone except herself. I wrote back exactly once: I forgive you, but I don't want you in my life. You taught me what kind of mother I don't want to be, what kind of woman I refuse to become. For that, I suppose I should thank you. 5 years after that conference room confrontation, I stood in the same office at Davis & Company. Mr. Davis had become a friend and the Foundation's legal counsel. He was retiring, and we were celebrating with champagne and stories about my grandfather's meticulous planning. He'd be proud, Mr. Davis said, raising his glass. You've multiplied his legacy 100 times over. He gave me permission to be myself, I replied. That was the real inheritance. Outside, the city hummed with evening traffic. People rushed home to families, to dinners, to lives both extraordinary and mundane. I thought about my grandfather's letter, worn now from repeated readings, kept in a safe deposit box alongside the original will documents. Make something beautiful, he'd written. And I had. Not from revenge or spite, but from the simple determination to prove that being overlooked doesn't mean being worthless. That quiet strength has its own power. That the best way to honor someone who believed in you is to become someone who believes in others. The $1 bill sat framed in my office, a reminder of the moment my life split into before and after. People often asked about it, expecting a bitter story. Instead, I told them about transformation, about a grandfather's love, about the freedom that comes from finally being seen. My parents became strangers. Sophia became a friend. The foundation became my purpose. And I became the woman my grandfather always knew I could be. Not despite my family's rejection, but perhaps because of it. Some lessons can only be learned through fire. Some strengths can only be forged in the furnace of being underestimated. I was no longer the girl at the end of the table, watching others celebrate while I collected crumbs of conditional affection. I was the woman who turned one symbolic dollar into millions of changed lives, who transformed pain into purpose, who proved that true worth has nothing to do with anyone else's recognition. And that, I thought, as I looked at my reflection in Mr. Davis's office window, was the inheritance that mattered. What do you think is the true measure of a person's worth?